Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the next installment of our Blood of Elves book club. Just some bookkeeping, if you will. Because school has started up and I'm getting much busier with teaching and lesson planning and all of those wonderful things that come along with the job. I believe I will try and get a video out every Wednesday or every Friday. But it will be down to one video a week. But I definitely want to keep getting them out, so keep that in mind. I will not be stopping this. I will continue to do this because I'm enjoying it, and it's a great opportunity to meet people and hear other opinions on what's going on in the world and what people do with the book. I think it's lovely. So, that being said, this will be part 2 of chapter 4, I believe. Geralt, Triss and Ciri have just met up with Yarpen and the Commissar and their royal wagon train, with Geralt saying that we need your help, but I'm not going to raise my blade against the Scoia'tael because, let's face it, it's not my fight. I don't need to be in this. And of course that causes problems between him and Yarpen later on, and it almost causes him not to be able to carry on in the wagon train. Based on the reading of what was happening, but thankfully Yarpen has some sway. He's in charge of it, and he has a history with Geralt, and he had medicine that thankfully is working on Triss's gastrointestinal distress, so that's nice. Looking at it, I really enjoyed seeing the conversation between Geralt and Yarpen up on the box of the wagon, with them just talking and Ciri eavesdropping. I thought there was some really good bits to the conversation, and it just helps flesh out the world a little bit. And I really enjoyed the interactions between Yarpen and Ciri, both rolling the medicine and with her on the box talking to him. I feel we're really getting to see Ciri learn all about the world firsthand, which is definitely something that not a lot of people get the opportunity to do. So she's getting to see what's going on, not from a book, but from the actual experience. And she's getting to meet all these colorful characters who will help her develop her, I guess, conscience, her morals. And I think she's leaning more towards the way Triss leans, which is there are conflicts out there, and as long as there's an active conflict in which people are threatened, we need to do what we can to stop that conflict, as opposed to respond to the results of said conflict, which is Geralt and the Witch's perspective. And I would agree with that to an extent. I think it depends on what actions you have to take in order to respond to the conflict. Standing up to a force that's out for quote-unquote evil definitely would be necessary, but preemptively attacking a force that has not yet made those evil actions very evident or acted on them. It's one thing to be blustery and be big talk. It's another thing to be responding to an imminent conflict. So I feel like, well, yes, I side with Triss and with Ciri and Yarpen. I can understand Geralt's stance, and especially when it comes to Geralt and the witches aren't hired blades. They're not sellswords. They have a very specific job, and they have a very specific code that they work through. And so with that in mind, I think it's respectable. I think the problem arises when they try and argue that what they do is moral, or when they try to have some sort of high ground that doesn't exist. And so, as such, I do believe they both have certain elements that are good for them. I think the part that was most entertaining for me was when Yarpen was talking about how people overthrow other races that are in. It's the ability to screw and reproduce faster, which of course made Geralt get upset with him, but it was an interesting look at how different entities come to power. Because to an extent, I could understand that. And if you're vying for the same scarce resources, I could see that. But in an instance where it's wolves versus rabbits, the wolves are still going to end up winning that conflict, although the rabbits breed faster. So I think it's relative. In the context here, though, the humans act as a predatory species that can reproduce faster than the gnomes, elves, dwarves, and as such become the threat and become the group that wants power. And I think there's definitely something to be said about how Andrzej Sapkowski writes these characters and writes this conflict that definitely adds something and is an interesting reflection on how we view other races, even like, African versus Asian versus European versus South American or Hispanic. Like there's so many different races, and yet we try and say which one is dominant, as though that makes a difference at a base biological level, and it doesn't. So I think it's really interesting to look at that, because in a fantasy world you can go even further than that, and in talking about sentience and the ability to think, and as Yarpen puts it, intelligent species that the witches refuse to kill, so dragons or other humans and non-humans like dwarves, elves, and gnomes. There's definitely a moral code there that Yarpen may not agree with, but that makes sense to the witches. And in recognizing that, some of the reasons people have for fighting each other, so like the knight who wants to round up all non-humans, isn't taking into account that they're conscious thinking beings. He takes into account that they're all the same, and he paints them with the same broad brush. And so it's causing problems for that world, and is throwing it back into chaos and onto the edge of war. War which last time ended up with 14 mages dead or near dead. Mages who tend to be reclusive and occasionally reactionary and avoid these conflicts, and who can live for ages and ages if they want to. So the world is still on the brink. It's a powder keg for them. Though, as Yarpen points out, nobody's mapped the entire world. There's no way of knowing what's beyond the seas, even though the elves came from there long ago. And how I just think it's interesting for this world, the gnomes were the first people in that particular land. So just getting a bit of the history and the backstory is really fascinating for me, and I think it really builds the world. And so I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with this campaign, with this caravan that they're on, because we know Geralt, Triss, and Ciri are all headed to the school, but this caravan is supposedly carrying salted fish, which apparently Geralt doesn't necessarily believe. And I've got a sneaking suspicion they're going to get ambushed at some point, just because that would add to the whole, can the Witcher take a side in this fight? I know he'd defend himself or defend Ciri, because when he's talking to Yarpen makes the comment, "Is she yours?" And without hesitation, Geralt says, "Mine, Yarpen, mine," referring to Ciri. So he already views her as his child, as his responsibility, as his daughter. And I think it would be hard-pressed to find him allowing any harm to ever come to her ever again, so long as he can do anything in his power to avoid it. And I think that was actually a very telling quote, "Mine, Yarpen, mine." That was probably one of the more powerful things he could say for being a man of few words. Like, without hesitation, he owns up to the fact that, yeah, this is my quote-unquote daughter. Because although he can't have children in the traditional sense, he has definitely adopted her, and she is his. So I think that's moving. we just ended. Well, I just ended reading where Triss woke up and had said she had been awake for a while and wanted to know more about how the history of the world was changed through screwing. And so I'm hoping to, over the weekend, finish reading the chapter and maybe a little more. We'll see what time I get, and how much I devote to actually being prepared for the next week of the school year. Today was actually the first day I had with full class periods. So yesterday we had 6th graders. Today we had 6th through 8th grade. It's fun. It'll pose unique challenges as always, but I'm looking forward to actually having a reason to read and having that little bit of fire under my butt to keep me going, because I know if it's just up to me and I didn't have this book club I'm working with, I'd probably let the book go by the wayside for a while, and I really don't want to let that happen again, especially since it's not short stories. So thank you for joining us. Please comment, let us know what you're thinking, let us know if you have any thoughts on this section. It was a smaller section I read, but it's what I managed to have time for. Hopefully from here on out, doing one video a week, we'll try and do one chapter a week. That should be much more doable. But please let us know if you have any ideas, suggestions, anything like that. I love to hear from you. I love to have these conversations. It's remarkable that YouTube is a great opportunity to talk with people all around the world, and I am thankful that I live in a time where I have that opportunity. So thank you for joining us, and have a good one. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our video. We do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, give us a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought, and as always, have a good one.